a note of Shraddhanjali to my initial Hindi teachers in this school, Kapuria Madam, Bharti Madam, Chaudhary Madam. Some of them are no more here with us, but I'm sure their blessings are with all of us, all the students that they have taught and infused with the interest and uh, love for this beautiful language of Hindi. And when I was learning from them, I would not have guessed that I would have ever got an opportunity of talking on this language. But here I am today with this opportunity. And who else shall I thank but my initial teachers? So thank you, and I touch their feet and start my talk. So here is the agenda. Uh, it's divided in two parts. First is going to talk about the Hindi language and the various general knowledge about it. And the second part is going to talk about Premchand, his life and his work, and with some discussion. Initially, the idea was to pay more attention to the second part, but uh, my slides kind of grew organically in number and I did not put too much of resistance. And now it has so happened that the emphasis is probably 60% on the first part and 40% on the second part. So let me start with the first part. And even before that, a word of clarification is that, I am not a scholar in any of these topics. So whatever you see me presenting can be divided largely in two parts. One is material scrapped out of the internet, okay? And the others are my opinions and observations. In other words, I'm not a researcher or a scholar in this area, so I would request for your pardon if I miss on some facts or some facts are, well, not facts, okay? So the idea is basically the following. I basically have always loved this language right from my childhood, and this is an opportunity for me to refresh my childhood memories of learning this language. I learned Hindi up to my 12th standard. After that, there has been no opportunity of learning it formally, but I have kept in touch with its literature since then, some of which I'm going to share with you today. But uh, this day is basically dedicated to try and relive all those beautiful memories that I had of studying Hindi in my school. I have also done the audacity of inviting some people who are far more knowledgeable than me in this language. So they may actually notice some errors, in which case, I would invite them to correct me on the chat box so that the others also know. I have no qualms about that. But the whole idea is to share with all of you those sweet memories of Hindi. So many of the things are basically creating the nostalgia of school day Hindi learning. So here is an introduction to the history and geography of Hindi. It is supposed to have originated from the Prakrit language, uh, which was the language group of languages that was used by the general public around 1,000 years back in the Indian subcontinent, particularly the northern part of it. And what really emerged out of them was a very large number of dialects, uh, each not necessarily with its own script or anything, but definitely with millions of speakers using those dialects. Uh, so some of those dialects, for example, Braj Bhasha, Awadhi, uh, Bhojpuri, uh, Maithili, etc., are there on the eastern side, and then on the western side we have Rajasthani, Pahari, etc. So all these dialects were kind of coexisting, mixing with each other, creating more dialects. That was the scenario that was emerging about 1,000 years back and a few centuries since then. And as things progressed, the Hindustani dialect, which was the dialect which was popular around the Delhi region, started becoming the more dominant one, obviously because of political reasons, because most of the empires were centered around that region. So that became the dominant dialect and eventually was formalized as Hindustani later on. As the Indian subcontinent split into two nations, the part of Hindustani which was dominated by Persian descendants, or Persian descendant, that asserted a separate entity identity for itself called Urdu, and another subset of Hindustani got created called Hindi, which is formally known as Hindi, which is the Sanskritized version of Hindustani. There are approximately about 350 million native speakers of this language. If we leave out all the dialects except the Hindi dialect, and this is a very conservative number, and if we add all the dialects that we are talking about, then well over 500 million people talk this language as their first language. For the purpose of this talk, I'm going to consider all these dialects as Hindi, okay, which will include Urdu and all these variants or dialects that you see here: Khadi Boli, Urdu, Braj Bhasha, Haryanvi, Bundeli, Pahari, which includes Kumaoni and Garhwali, and then Eastern Indian dialects, which are Awadhi, Bagheli, Chhattisgarh. Chhattisgarh is mid Indian, Bhojpuri, Maithili, Magahi, all these things, and even the variants which are used in the Deccan Plateau, which are the Hyderabadi and Bangalorean versions of Urdu. And there are many places outside India where Hindi is widely used, and they have their own variants. Even far northeastern states like Arunachal Pradesh also have their own versions of Hindi. So it's a people's language. It has spread very widely, and it really varies a lot. This map just shows to demonstrate to you the various variants of Hindi, the bolis that are used in just Bihar. And you can see that all these districts that you see here may have their own variants of Hindi. And that is a very interesting aspect about Hindi, that it rapidly changes form as you travel along any direction in the Indian subcontinent. And therefore, it is very hard to even tell whether it is one language or a collection of bolis. In fact, that is also the strength of this language. It has kind of organically spread. It is not a result of the spread of Hindi and the acceptance of Hindi is not a result of imperial or colonial reasons, as the case is with, let's say, English or French or Spanish. It is in true sense a people's language, as most of the Indian languages are. So if we are talking about the various variants of Hindi, we must also talk about the various people's variants of Hindi. And here I have intentionally included a funny looking image. Probably some of you recognize him. He's the actor Satish Kaushik, and he's playing the role of Pappu Peja. And what I have done is to just lighten up the mood a little bit. I have included one scene from this movie, which contains a little bit of use of Bambaiya Hindi. So let me try and do that.
Hello, पप्पू पेजर बोल रहा हूँ। ए झंटूले झटक ज्यादा ना मटक और मेरी बात गले में सटक। मुन्नू मोबाइल मेरा छोटा भाई हैगा, मैं उसका मोटा भाई पप्पू पेजर लाइन पे हूँ। ए मटन के चिलके, ए इंट्रोडक्शन लेना बंद कर, नहीं तो माउथ पीस में डाल के रिसीवर से निकाल के कनपटी में घुसा डालूंगा, अल्टी पल्टी हो जाएगा। तो पप्पू पेजर पे ब्लेम मत डालना, समझा क्या? काटता हूँ।
ए किधर घुस रहा है?
आंदो अपॉइंटमेंट है आंदो। आजा रे आजा, लहरा के आजा।
बुल्लू रंगीला पेजर भाई।
वो टपकाने का है, उसको साथ में लाया है क्या?
नहीं पेजर भाई, मैं उसकी फोटो लेकर
अरे यार, साथ में लाता तो इसको यहीं सुला डालता है ना। पप्पू पेजर के आवन जावन का टाइम बच जाता देगा।
कितने का फाड़ू?
क्या
चेक?
टमाटर के आखिरी दाने। अरे पप्पू पेजर के यहाँ चेक वेक का लफड़ा नहीं चलता, समझा क्या? कैश चाहिए, हार्ड कैश।
लेकिन कैश के लिए तो मुझे अपने पा को फोन करना पड़ेगा।
तू अपने पा को पापड़ खिला और जल्दी से फोन घुमा डाल।
आप छोड़ो तो मैं पकड़ू ना यार। ये मेरे घर का नंबर क्या है? नहीं मैं आइला।
आप पप्पू पेजर है?
उधर।
थैंक यू।
मेरे पा
नो भाई साहब, एक मिनट।
स्टोरी सुनाना बंद कर और जल्दी से रोकड़ा निकाल, समझा क्या? और अपने हीरो हीरालाल को पतली गली से लेके दुड़की हो जा।
एक मिनट पुन्नू, ये पैसे देकर किस चक्कर में पड़ रहा है? तू पागल हो गया क्या?
आपको पैसे की पड़ेली है, बेटे की नहीं पड़ेली है।
और ये पड़ेली जैसी सड़ेली बातें क्यों करना है? बोलना नहीं, पतली गली से निकल जा, समझ ले बस। इस गुंडे को मुंह मत लगाना।
पक्का?
पक्का।
ओके।
हाँ।
अच्छा पेजर भाई, मैं वापस ले रहा हूँ।
काहे को रे?
वो क्या है ना, मेरे पा बोल रहे हैं काहे को गुंडे लोगों को मुंह लगाता है यार। ये भड़क गए तो अपनों को तोड़ डालते, दूसरे को तो फोड़ डालेंगे।
मम्मी! क्या बोला रे तू? दूध के फटेरे हिस्से, तू मेरे बारे में क्या बोला इसको?
क्या
बोला?
तूने मेरे पा को मारा? हाँ, तूने मेरे पा को मारा? हाँ, अब बोल, दूध का फटेला हिस्सा कौन है?
ए मैं हूँ रे।
काजू का निचला हिस्सा कौन है?
ए मैं हूँ रे।
काला बैगन कौन है?
ए मैं हूँ रे।
हाँ, बैटरी निकल गई तो पेजर बंद पड़ गया ना। अबे हटा सावन की घटा, खा खुजा पत्ती बुझा के सो जा, निंटकले पिंटुकले। मंटी पे खड़े लिए अंटी बजा रही बार बार घंटी, कुल्ला घुमा के पश्चिम को पलट ले। बहुत हो गया फुटले वटले छलावन, क्या चल को बाहर छोड़ गया।
मुन्नू बेटा, ये कहा सीखा?
पिक्चर में देखा था बाप। और तू भी सुन ले, मुन्नू वो खंबा नहीं है इसे तुझ जैसा कुत्ता टांग उठा के गीला कर डाले, क्या?
तुम लोग घबराने का नहीं, क्या समझे? वो क्या है ना कि पहली बार पप्पू पेजर को कोई आदमी भारी पड़ेला है, सोचना पड़ेगा।
Okay, so that was Bombaya Hindi. So I don't know whether it is authentic Bombaya Hindi or not, but just as I claimed that it's people's language, they take their liberty to morph it, mold it in their own taste, and that's how this particular dialect has evolved. It is spoken largely in Bombay or Mumbai, which is the adda for Bollywood movies, and hence it has been used in Bollywood movies a lot. And of course, people do speak this type of Hindi there. I have been witness to that, and since I lived there for some time, I even got infected with that style of speaking for some time. If not for anything else, it has definitely served the Indian film industry with a lot of comical appeal, as you saw. The other language which has other dialect which has been used very widely in Bollywood movies is the Bhojpuri dialect. And Bhojpuri dialect was used a lot in earlier movies, in older movies in 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Of late, that dominance has been probably taken up by Bombaya Hindi, maybe, or more Western Indian Hindi. But of late, Bhojpuri form of Hindi has kind of started making a resurgence in the movie world, because there is a very burgeoning industry, Bhojpuri film industry, which probably is mostly targeted towards the mass appeal, not necessarily elite class kind of thing. But of late, Bhojpuri has started making some serious appearances. And I'm showing you this particular slide here of this Bambai Ma Kaaba, a very beautiful poem recited by Manoj Bajpayee. And I would request your time to listen to at least a minute of this again.
Afternoon, hundreds of migrants gather in Jaipur to get
2 बीघा में घर बा लेकिन चूतल बानी टेम्पू में, जिंदगी अजुराइल बाटे नून तेला शैम्पू में, मनवा हरियर लागे भैया हाथ लगोते माटी में, जेरा अजबो अटकल बाटे घर में चोखा बाटी में। काबा जिंदगी हम तो जियल चाहे खेत बगीचा बारी में, छोड़ छाड़ सब आइल बानी हम यहाँ लाचारी में। कहाँ मुंबई में काबा, बन के हमसे कोटी वाला डबल ड्यूटिया खाटा तानी, घिबरी के बाती के जैसे रोज रोज हम घाटा तानी। केकरा इतना शौक बाटे मच्छर से कटवावे के चाहेला ए तेरे अपने के नर्वसावे के काबा।
So that was a little bit about Bhojpuri. I also have provided the link to the lyrics of this poem. I would request you to go through that. Very, very hard-hitting and serious poetry it is. And you would be surprised if you have thought of Bhojpuri as merely a kind of comic, sweet-sounding dialect of Hindi. So that's a little bit about how Bollywood and the various dialects of Hindi have been interacting with each other. So here is a quiz for you. So there will be a electronic toffee for anyone who answers this question on the chat first. So apun tera game baja dalenga. Okay, what does this mean in simple English? So whoever answers this question on the chat, and Professor Amit, you will please tell who gives the correct answer to this question on the chat box. This is just a fun quiz to lighten up the moment. Let me know if anybody answers, Professor Amit.
Ayan Carr says, I will kill you.
Yeah.
I will beat you, I will finish you, all those variants.
Right. Okay, that's the correct answer. So this will go to London to Ayan, who is my childhood friend, by the way. So, okay, this is the second question. Which famous movie has this dialogue? Apun lafa master hai. This is also Mumbaiya Hindi. Lafa means slap. Okay, let's move on. This is Munna Bhai MBBS. Okay, so a little bit of serious academic stuff. This is the alphabet of Hindi, which has got about 12 swaras or vowels and a bunch of, I think, 32 or something vyanjans. No need to go through them. Just things which are common to almost all Indian languages. They are divided into these vargas: ka varg, cha varg, ta varg, ta varg, pa varg, which basically are groups of consonants which are the sound of which are created by interaction of specific parts of your mouth. So yeah, so that's the alphabet of Hindi. This is a little bit about the Hindi literature history, particularly the poetic literature. It's divided to 4 parts: the ancient part, the bhakti part or devotional part, Reetikal, where not much change happened, and then the Adhunik part, where our Bharatnendu Harishchandra, Mahadevi Varma, and Dinkar-like poets are considered to be the luminaries of this particular age. So I have made a list of people who have influenced the Hindi literature the most over the last 500-600 years. Tulsidas must be named probably the first. We all know him by Ramcharitmanas. We have Mirabai, who was the Rajasthani princess devotional saint, who is known for her devotional songs for Krishna. And here I have left a link to a 1945 movie, which surprisingly and magically stars our beloved M.S. Subbalakshmi, and she has rendered some of Meera bhajans very beautifully with a amalgamation of Carnatic classical as well as Hindustani classical style. So I would request you to definitely watch this movie, if not the entire movie, at least the songs. Very, very enchanting. Then we have our favorite Kabir Das, whose Duha, if you have studied Hindi, then you have not missed his Duhas for sure. And his Duhas are very, very popular. They have found their way into the religious scriptures of many faiths. For instance, Guru Granth Sahib has many Duhas from Kabir as well as Surdas. So here is Surdas. Surdas was the born blind poet saint who was a Krishna Bhakta, and he is known for his epic Sursagar, which contains couplets primarily in praise of Krishna. Then in the modern age, we have our lady poet Subhadra Kumar Chauhan. She was very popular and very influential in her time, but we all know her by her very energizing, energetic poet on Jhansi Ki Rani. बुंदेले हर बोलो के मुंह हमने सुनी कहानी थी, खूब लड़ी मर्दानी वो तो झांसी वाली रानी थी. I think we all have learned this poem in our childhood and have loved it. So she was the creator of that. Then we have Mahadevi Varma, who was her contemporary, probably trailing her by a few years. And she's loved for her sketches, as in not graphic sketches, but literary sketches and memoirs. And she's considered to be one of the pillars of the romantic movement of Hindi literature. And the picture that you see here is of a cat whose name is Gillu. Gillu was my pet. He lived with us for about 10 years or so. And he was named after Gillu, which was the main character of one of the sketches written by Mahadevi Varma, which everyone in our family loved. Mahadevi Varma's specialty was writing this very affectionate sketches about various animals that she had in her house. And they were like, you know, thinking, talking characters in her sketches. And we loved it so much that we named our pet after that particular character. Of course, this Gillu was a bully, nowhere similar to the Gillu that was described in Mahadevi Varma's sketch. And then we have Makhanlal Chaturvedi, who is, of course, again, has been very prolific, but probably is known best for his this very beautiful poem, Pushp Ki Abhilasha. We all have studied this in our childhood, and I could have actually played a video for this, which is basically a rendition by famous singer Hemant Kumar. But I thought, let me probably try something else. Let me recite this for you, the same composition in my own voice. So with your permission, I will try that. चाह नहीं मैं सुरबाला के गहनों में गूंथा चाह नहीं प्रेमी माला में बिंद प्यारी को ललचाऊं, चाह नहीं सम्राटों के शव पर हे हरि डाला जाओ, चाह नहीं देवों के सिर पर चढ़ूं, भाग्य पर इठलाऊं, मुझे तोड़ लेना बनमाली उस पथ पर देना तुम फेंक, मातृभूमि पर शीश चढ़ाने जिस पथ जाए वीरने, जिस पथ जाए वीरने. So that was Pushpiki Abhilasha. Sorry if I made a mistake, but that was again to reminisce one of our very favorite childhood memories, the rendition by Hemanta. Then we have Ramdhari Singh Dinkar, who is one of the angry poets of the modern era. And if you really want to see how much energy he infuses into his poetry, you should read Rashmirathi. And if you do not have time for that, you would probably like to click one of these links, which has the recitation of a particular adhyay of that poem by Manoj Bajpayee as well as Ashutosh Rana. Both of them are very good actors of Hindi cinema and theatre, and they have rendered in their own special way that particular episode of Rashmirathi. It makes your hair stand on its end when you hear it. So definitely click on these links and listen to them. And then some luminaries from the Bollywood world. And I would like to name Sahir Ludhianvi first, because he's my favorite poet come lyricist of Indian cinema. The 4 or 5 people I'm going to name here are not necessarily the most popular Hindi film lyricists, but they were people who were actually poets, but made significant name in Hindi cinema also. They were all Sahitya Academy winners. So Sahir was Sahitya Academy winner. And this is one of the lines from one of his favorite songs. Then we have Kaifi, who was again a kind of rebel poet of his time and made good name in cinema as well as elsewhere. We have Jan Nisar Akhtar, who wrote not many Hindi film poems or songs, but all of them are masterpieces. Some of them actually bring tears into my eyes when I listen to them. And then we, of course, we have our beloved Gulzar Sahab, who is Sahitya Academy winner, Padma Vibhushan, I think, if I'm not wrong, is Dada Saheb Phalke winner. He's a 86, he recently turned 86, I think. So God may grant him a long life and many, many thousands of beautiful poems for us. So these are the various luminaries I would like to bring forth in front of you, who have enriched the Indian Hindi literature in particular. There are some other things which I will skip now. I even had some quiz for you, but I will skip that too. And I will directly go to the second part, which is on Upanyas Samrat Premchand. So this is a shorter part, hopefully. And what I'm going to do here is outline a little bit about his life and times and talk about one or two of his main works. So this is a one-page biography of Munshi Premchand, who was named Dhanpat Rai Srivastava, and he was born in Lamhi in 1880. And a mere 56 years later, he left this world. In between, he had a life which probably can easily be dismissed as a very mundane and difficult life, economically, personally, and health-wise. He stayed in various places like Banaras, Kanpur, Bombay, Gorakhpur. Uh, he worked with various periodicals and ran into all sorts of difficulties, again financial as well as political, because he was a person with um, rebellious undertones in his poetry, in his creations, and therefore British people didn't like him. He even tried his hand at film script writing in about 1930 or so. Didn't like the idea and went back to Banaras after that. So overall, a kind of uninteresting life, I would say, at least if looked at from far away. In fact, प्रेमचंद himself says that मेरा जीवन सपाट समतल मैदान है जिसमें कहीं कहीं गड्ढे तो हैं पर टीलों, पर्वतों, घने जंगलों, गहरी घाटियों और खंडहरों का स्थान नहीं है। जो सज्जन पहाड़ों की सैर के शौकीन हैं उन्हें तो यहाँ निराशा ही होगी। So he himself probably considered his life as pretty mundane and uninteresting. However, what got produced, the intellectual output which got produced from this uninteresting and difficult life was phenomenal. The world around him at that time was very turbulent. Colonial was in its cruelest peak. The Indian civilization had been butchered, murdered, plundered in all possible ways that colonialism can. World War, the First World War was raging around that time. Struggle for independence was gaining strength, and the Mahatma was already becoming one of the rising stars of this struggle for independence. So all these things, in some or the other way, affected what he produced as literary output. In fact, struggle for independence was one of the recurring themes in his work, and he also had Gandhian undertones in his work. He produced about 13-14 novels and 300 odd stories, out of which some of them have been listed here. I have not bothered to create an exhaustive list. You can find it anywhere in the internet. Godan was his last novel, a very large piece of work, and probably the biggest masterpiece that he produced. Godan is a gift of cow and traces the life of a person called Hori, who dreams to own a cow. Okay, and in the process describes the entire canvas of Indian life, which includes the political turmoil, the inequity between urban and rural life, the various kinds of exploitations that farmers have to face, the exploitations and discriminations against women, casteism and whatnot. It is an incredibly rich canvas of stories, this Godan, and beautifully woven together through the story of Hori. Then we have Gaban, which means embezzlement or misappropriation of government money, which is also the story that I'm going to talk about a little more in detail, and then many others. So the reason why I have picked up Premchand is because as a growing kid and a young adult, I went through almost all these books, some of them multiple times. I have been in awe of him forever, as long as I remember, and therefore, if I were to talk about Hindi literature and I had to pick one figure, then it has had to be Premchand. So what are the dominant themes in Premchand's work? He vividly describes village life, their discussions, all the social problems they have got, again, the discriminations and the hypocrisies that are there in village life. Amazingly insightful creations, considering the fact that he himself seemed to be largely an urban person. Of course, his childhood and part of his adulthood was spent in villages. Then he has described poverty, and we should not be surprised why that must have been the case. He had seen poverty from close quarters, and poverty was one of the, what you say, plagues that Indian society was facing at that time. And he talked about a plethora of other social oppressions based upon economic discrimination, casteism, and gender-based. Patriotism runs very strong as one of the undertones in his all his work, particularly the later part. And one thing that you will see invariably is the presence of strong women characters. In fact, almost all his stories have at least one or two strong central female characters who basically steer the storyline. Even though the protagonist may nominally be a male, but if I remember it correctly, all his novels, the strongest character is typically a female character. And then he discusses many emotions with great vibrance, great vividness, love of all kinds, whether it is parental love, whether it is romantic love, whether it is love for your nation, whether it is devotional love, all kinds of emotions which broadly can be categorized as love have been treated very, very vividly by Premchand. And then there are many other emotions that we experience in our personal lives have been treated very, very well by Premchand. And one thing that binds all these things together is the realism in his stories. So, for example, his characters are never black and white. They are all shades of gray. Even the protagonists are typically people with lots of fallibilities, lots of characteristic weaknesses and stuff like that. And you will also see that there will be long conversations in his stories, often leading to no apparent conclusion. But if you read them, reread them, something starts getting built inside. And then he gives very neutral treatment to many things. So there are hardly ever, at least in his later works, any long discourses given by the author. There are long discourses given by his characters, but hardly ever by the author himself. And all this he does with a very, very simple language. And this is what probably distinguishes him from his contemporaries, who used to use very literary Hindi, but he chose a very simple and accessible form of Hindi, which tended towards Dehati Hindi. So, in fact, if there is anything very difficult to understand in Premchand's books, it is his strong use of, rural Hindi. The Hindustani Hindi that we understand is typically extremely accessible. And if you know Hindi to any non-trivial extent, you will be able to understand everything that he writes. So now what I will do is I will just, gradually draw to a close by discussing some excerpts from two of his creations. One is a short story and one is a novel. The short story is a story called Mandir. And again, a one-page summary of that is the following. It basically talks about one night in the life of a poor lower caste widow called Sukhiya. Sukhiya's little son is very ill. In fact, probably in, about to die or something. She sees her dead husband in her dream, who says that she should go to the nearby temple and, pray to God, and the child will get all right. So she doesn't have any money, so she mortgages her remaining bangles or jewelry to buy the puja material and visits the temple. Unfortunately, because she belongs to the Chamar caste, which is the leather, what is that called? I don't remember the English word for that. People who deal with leather, basically. So she belongs to that, which is a very considered to be a very lower caste in the traditional caste system. So she was not allowed to enter the puja, the temple, leave alone offering a puja. So she initially struggles with the Purohit and the people around. In the process, her son dies, and eventually even she dies. So it's a very sad story. Just probably 2 or 3 pages, but the point is, it so vividly brings up the pathetic state that Indian society was, particularly, so this individual was particularly disadvantaged, right? So she was a woman, she belonged to a lower caste, she was a widow, so a soft target for all kinds of oppressions, and all that happens in that little depiction. So here is a little excerpt from the last passage of that. So when her son dies, she gets angry and she kind of gives a lecture or speech to the villagers. So she says, पापियों, मेरे बच्चों के प्राण लेकर दूर क्यों खड़े हो? मुझे भी क्यों नहीं उसी के साथ मार डालते? मेरे छूने से ठाकुर जी को छूत लग गई? पारस को छूकर लोहा सोना हो जाता है, पारस लोहा नहीं हो सकता। मेरे छूने से ठाकुर अपवित्र हो जाएंगे? मुझे बनाया तो छूत नहीं लगी, लो अब कभी ठाकुर जी को छूने नहीं आऊंगी। ताले में बंद रखो, पहरा बैठा दो। हाय, तुम्हें दया छू भी नहीं गई, तुम इतने कठोर हो, बाल बच्चे वाले होकर भी तुम्हें एक अभागिन माता पर दया न आई, तिस पर धर्म के ठेकेदार बनते हो। तुम सबके सब हत्यारे हो, निपट हत्यारे हो, डरो मत। मैं थाना पुलिस नहीं जाऊंगी, मेरा न्याय भगवान करेंगे, अब उन्हीं के दरबार में फरियाद करूंगी। And this is how the story ends. I will not attempt reading it because it creates a lump in my throat. But the reason why it does that to me is not because it's so tragic, but because of the fact that the tragedy is so repressed in this, so restrained in that. So in the way Premchand ends this story and also begins this story is by talking about mother and motherhood, and not about all the oppression. So people may actually start reading this story thinking of motherhood, womanhood, and all that, but it turns out to be a very piercing commentary on the state of affairs in the society at that point in time. And that is a recurring style of representation by Premchand. I'm sure people, students of literature probably even know what this particular style of representation is, but I have seen this being used very, very prominently by Premchand in many of his creations, where he makes it appear as if he's talking about something else, but it ends up being a commentary about something completely different, much more serious, much more poignant, I would say. So that's Mandir. And now I will talk about Gaban, which is a novel. Let me just do a time check. So Gaban is, I think, his penultimate story, penultimate major creation, his second most famous novel, I would say. And it traces the events in the lives of these two people, Ramanath and Jalpa, who are husband and wife. The photos here you see are of Sunil Dutt and Sadhana, who actually played these roles in the 1966 movie of that name, which basically is based upon this particular novel. And I have just used these images to kind of give a graphic sense to my descriptions. So Ramanath is a very weak-minded, vain kind of young person. He's given to all sorts of weaknesses, be it lying, be it corruption, be it vanity, he has all those things. By nature, he's a good person. He doesn't want to harm anyone, but he has all these weaknesses. On the other hand, Jalpa, who he marries in the beginning part of the novel, is a stronger character, sort of the central character of the novel. But she also has a weakness. She loves jewelry. Okay, she loves jewelry to the extent of obsession, and she dreams of possessing or owning a particular kind of jewelry called a chandrahar, which is a thick necklace, and the story kind of revolves around that. So Ramanath and Jalpa get married, and Ramanath's father incurs a very large debt in the process, and in order to pay that, eventually Ramanath is forced to actually steal his own wife's jewelry without telling her. So this particular depiction is again, very interesting part of the story, where his father, who is a reasonably principled person, how he gets drawn into becoming hand in glove in this crime, and he's not able to kind of extricate himself. After that, Ramanath gets deeper and deeper into trouble. One reason being the fact that he loves his wife so much, and he has this weakness that he can't own to her that they are in financial difficulties. So he keeps putting up show of plenty in front of her, and in the process slides deeper and deeper into debt. Comes to a point where one fine day, he's by the way an excise clerk, and he has this job of collecting excise duties and depositing it at the end of the workday every day. And one day he fails to do so because he direly needs that money only for that particular night. Okay, but then once he does that, he loses that money, and he's not able to go back to the to his office and replace that money, reinstate that money. And obviously that's a case of embezzlement, and with the fear of being arrested, he runs away to Calcutta. So several months pass. Jalpa has no clue where her husband has gone. She, by the way, comes to know why he has run away, and she takes the remainder of her jewelry, pays up his debts, and kind of clears him off all his charges. So he's not really a convicted a criminal, so to say, in the law, in the eyes of law. And then she's continuously trying to find out a way how to find her husband out. So she has this idea, bright idea. She knows that Ramanath is an avid chess player. Okay, he used to be a chess player, and he used to be very good at it. So what she does is she takes his chess book, takes a puzzle out of it, and publishes it as a chess puzzle in one of the Calcutta newspapers. So Ramanath is naturally drawn towards that and solves it. Okay, and goes and tries to collect the prize money for that. This helps Jalpa track him down, and she comes and tries to meet him. But what happens is, in the meantime, Ramanath gets into the trap of the police there, which is again a very corrupt, a group of very corrupt individuals. And what they do is they blackmail him into becoming a police victim for a police witness for a false case, where a group of 15 people, innocent people, are being convicted for a false charge. So when Jalpa comes to know of it, she sends a secret message to him. Basically, what you see here is she has wrapped a letter over a stone, and she's in the process of throwing that stone towards her husband, who is actually kind of captivated by the police. The police have actually kept Ramanath in a very lavish conditions, luxurious conditions, so that he can't interact with the rest of the world and can't change his mind. So when Ramanath reads that message, he goes to meet Jalpa, and she convinces him to change his mind. However, when he goes back to the bungalow, he is again threatened back into the same earlier state, and he repeats his statement in the court. In the process, there is a description of his attraction towards a courtesan called Zohra. And Jalpa, when she sees that Ramanath is kind of beyond redemption, decides to leave him and devotes herself to the service of the convicts' families. However, events take turn for the better, and eventually Ramanath is able to gather hearts to go ahead and confess that he had given a wrong statement, and this leads to the liberation of all the convicts, and it's kind of a happy ending. So in this film, this is the last scene, where the hero and the heroine embrace each other, and then like all self-respecting cameras of those days, it turns its gaze towards the other less interesting parts of the scene, which is here the architectural part of the scenery. So that's how the movie ends, but the novel doesn't end this way. The novel actually talks about, they're going and settling near Prayagraj and leading a clean and chaste life after that. So this is the, story in nutshell. A tapestry of many depictions, which, if you go into the details, you will be able to enjoy it better, of course. So I wanted to add this word of critique. So I felt that the story is very rich, and it was paced a little too high. Okay, it should have gone a little slower. The police trap is not very convincing, in my opinion. There are many characters who come and go and do not get their due place in the story. That's, of course, my feeling. As I said, these are all my opinion. I'm no scholar. And the ending kind of is predictable. But again, we have to discount Premchand being a pre-Bollywood writer. Okay, in fact, the Bollywood movies which have allowed us to predict the ending have actually followed this pattern and not the other way around. So there are some excerpts. I will let it go because I'm running out of time. So basically, these are all little paragraphs which I had added to describe how Premchand deals with these various human emotions. So this is the last slide, and I'm done with my presentation. It was basically a beautiful opportunity to relook at Hindi, which is a language I dearly love, and flip through the pages of the books I have read during the last few years and during my growing years. Premchand, I will go ahead and make this bold statement that I consider Premchand to be in the cadre of Tolstoy, Chekhov, and Tagore. Such is his capability. And in fact, let me make be even bolder and say that I would consider him ahead of, let's say, Dickens and George Eliot and people like that. So I hope you found it enjoyable and informative. And to the people who are more knowledgeable than me on these subjects, bhul chuk hui to kshama kare, maaf kare. I tried my best to scavenge all the information that I could from the internet and the books that I have read, and I could have definitely made mistakes. And for others, the slides contain a lot of links which could help you explore further if you are interested, and I hope some of you will make use of them. So with that, I give my thanks to all of you for being with me throughout this 1 hour, And my special thanks to Professor Amit for letting me have this opportunity, and to everyone else. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sujit. Thank you for a wonderful talk. Premchand is someone who I have also grown up reading, and I can relate to the emotions that you have for Premchand. Thank you very much. Thank you also very much for the beautiful rendition of Pushp Ki Abhilasha. That was wonderful. We have some time for questions, comments. Anyone would want to go ahead? There was one question on the YouTube thing, and that was by Shiva Shankar. Sujit, is Khadi Boli generally accepted as the closest to the written literature?
Well, again, let me say this with some sort of, and if somebody else has more knowledge, then I invite them to join in. But Khadi Boli is the dialect of Hindi which is broadly spoken in and around Hindi, and from that has emerged the kind of Hindi that you and I speak. But the other dialects are very much popular. They are all multi-million speakers, and so it would be wrong to exclude them. But yes, the pedantic Hindi that we read is basically a derivative of Khadi Boli.
One more comment, and maybe your reactions on that. You did include the Hyderabadi Hindi or Bangalore Hindi or Urdu.
Yes.
So Hindi and Urdu, they're not very different in that sense.
Both. No, they are not, in fact.
Yeah, and maybe it's the politics of the time that has made it look different. But Hindi, Urdu have similar kind of origins. They are more, say, democratic languages spoken by people.
Yes.
And with certain affiliations. Maybe Hindi has some Sanskrit words more than Urdu, and Urdu has more Farsi words than Hindi would have. But they are all both in terms of their origin, they share very similar kind of trajectories.
If I'm not wrong, sir, Urdu is the language that was spoken by sepoys in their tents. That is how it started. That is how it is believed to have originated.
Yes, I think these are very kind of mass people's languages. So Hindi is also in that sense is an amalgamation of a lot of different, say, you have words from Sanskrit, you have words from Farsi in Hindi. And similarly, I think Urdu also is amalgamation of various languages. And in that sense, they're very people-centered, mass kind of languages as they've evolved. And I just one comment. I'm trying to sum up all the sessions. Right from, say, Shiva's Mahaprasthanam's reading and even Pradisha's readings and others, it appears that literature has thrived because of a very mass kind of following.
Yes.
Even when Professor Raghavan was talking about Sanskrit, it does not appear that these are very elitist languages, and that is what makes them thrive and survive. These language, I think, thrives because more and more people relate to languages, and I think all these languages that we have been exposed to over the last 6-7 sessions, through the books that were read, point to something very similar. That it's more and more people who talk, who write about it, and that is what makes languages grow and thrive. So, Sujit, your last comments, and then we can end. Anything?
So I thank you, Professor Amit, for giving me this opportunity, and I thank all the audience for being so wonderful and being generous with their comments. I hope you liked it, and I'm sure the slides will be shared with you in time, and you can explore further through the links that I have provided. Thank you.